Good evening, and welcome back to Bedtime and Historian. Have you ever wondered how a boy born in a small, unremarkable town, far from power, far from courts, far from anything that seemed to shape the world, could grow into a voice that would one day speak for kings, lovers, fools, and entire nations? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as you settle in, feel free to share your location and local time in the comments. It's always quietly fascinating to see where in the world these stories travel and who is listening beside you in the night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The story begins not in a grand city, but in a modest market town called Stratford-upon-Avon, in the heart of England. It is the mid-16th century, a time when life moves with the rhythm of seasons rather than clocks. The streets are narrow, often muddy, lined with timber-framed houses whose upper floors lean slightly forward as if listening to passers-by. The smell of wood smoke lingers in the air, mixed with the sharper scents of leather, livestock, and damp earth. Here, in April of 1564, a child is born into a household that, for a time, stands comfortably among its neighbours. His name is William Shakespeare. His father, John Shakespeare, is a tradesman, working with leather and gloves, a respectable and practical occupation. He is also involved in local government, holding positions that bring both status and responsibility. The family is not wealthy, but they are secure enough to live with a sense of order and expectation. His mother, Mary Arden, comes from a family with deeper rural roots, tied to land and tradition, bringing into the household a quieter sense of continuity. The home itself is busy, not silent or isolated. Children move through its rooms, and the daily work of living fills every corner. There is no clear separation between family life and labour. Food is prepared close to where goods are stored. Conversations happen alongside work, and the boundaries between public and private life are soft. For a child growing up here, observation is not a skill learned later. It is simply part of being present. Outside, Stratford is a place where everyone knows something about everyone else. News travels by voice rather than paper. A traveller passing through might bring stories of London or distant ports, but such things feel far away, almost abstract. The town is more concerned with harvests, local disputes, and the steady passing of time. And yet, even in such a contained world, there are signs of change. England itself is not still. The country is under the rule of Elizabeth I, a monarch whose reign brings both stability and tension. Religion, in particular, shapes everyday life in ways that are not always visible at first glance. The country has moved through shifts between Catholic and Protestant practices, and while outward conformity is expected, private beliefs can still linger beneath the surface. For a child like William, these larger forces are not explained in formal terms. They are felt instead through small details, changes in church services, the tone of certain conversations, the careful way adults speak about authority. It is a world where what is said openly and what is understood quietly are not always the same. The River Avon moves slowly near the town, providing both practical support and a sense of quiet continuity. It carries goods, reflects the sky, and marks the passage of time in a way that feels steady and unhurried. Children play near its banks, and it becomes part of their sense of place without needing to be noticed directly. William's early years unfold within this environment, shaped less by dramatic events and more by the steady repetition of ordinary life. He watches how people behave when they are at ease, and how they behave when they are not. He notices how quickly moods can shift, how laughter can turn to irritation, how pride can appear in small gestures. These are not lessons given to him, they are patterns he begins to recognize simply by paying attention. Inside the household, his father's role in the community means that visitors sometimes come and go, bringing with them different ways of speaking and carrying themselves. These encounters, brief as they are, widen the boundaries of what William can imagine. He begins to understand, even at a young age, that people can live very different lives while sharing the same space. At the same time, there is an underlying sense of expectation. Families like the Shakespeares do not plan for distant fame or creative legacy. The future is usually practical, tied to trade, family, and continuation. A son is expected to learn, to contribute, and eventually to take on responsibilities of his own. There is little room, at least outwardly, for wandering ambition, and yet something quieter is forming. It is not visible in any single moment. There is no clear sign that this child will grow into anything beyond what is expected. But there is a habit of attention, a way of noticing how words are used, how people present themselves, how small differences in tone can change the meaning of what is said. In a town like Stratford, language is not ornamental. It is direct, practical, often shaped by necessity. But even within this simplicity, there is variation. A merchant speaks differently from a farmer. A local official chooses words more carefully than someone with nothing to protect. These differences, subtle as they may seem, begin to gather in William's mind. The town also offers moments of shared experience. Market days bring a sense of movement and energy, with voices overlapping and goods changing hands. Seasonal festivals mark time in ways that feel both communal and familiar. Travelling performers occasionally arrive, setting up temporary stages and drawing small crowds. Their presence is brief, but their effect lingers, offering a glimpse of something outside the ordinary rhythm of the town. For a young observer, such moments are not simply entertainment. They suggest that stories can be shaped, that voices can take on roles, that the same person can become someone else for a short time. The idea does not yet form into ambition, but it settles quietly, waiting. Life, however, does not remain entirely stable. Even in these early years, the balance within the household is not guaranteed. Economic conditions shift, and positions of status can change more quickly than they are gained. The sense of security that once felt steady begins, in small ways, to show signs of strain. But at this stage, William is still a child, moving through a world that feels both familiar and quietly complex. He does not yet know that his life will stretch far beyond Stratford, or that the patterns he is observing will one day take shape in ways that reach far beyond anything he can see. For now, his world is defined by narrow streets, a busy household, and a steady stream of human behaviour unfolding around him. And in that quiet beginning, without announcement or expectation, the foundations of something lasting begin to take form. In the years following William's early childhood, the sense of stability within his household begins to shift in ways that are not immediately spoken about, but are gradually felt in daily life. His father, John Shakespeare, had once stood as a visible and active figure within Stratford. He had held municipal positions, taken part in local decisions, and moved through the town with the confidence of someone whose place was secure. His trade as a glover and leather worker provided steady income, and his role in civic life brought both recognition and responsibility. For a time, the household benefited from both. But position in a small town is never fixed. It depends on reputation, finances, and the ability to maintain both. And over time, John's circumstances begin to change. The reasons are not recorded in simple terms. There are no clear statements explaining a single cause. Instead, what remains are Trace's missed payments, legal difficulties, and a gradual withdrawal from public duties. He begins to attend council meetings less often. Fines appear in records where once there had been regular participation. The steady presence he once maintained in town life becomes uncertain. Inside the household, this change is not discussed in formal language. It appears instead in small adjustments. Expenses are watched more closely. Certain comforts become less frequent. The rhythm of the home remains, but with a quieter awareness that something has altered. For William, still young but no longer unaware, this shift introduces a different kind of understanding. He begins to see that status is not permanent, and that the way people are regarded can change without clear warning. The same neighbours who once treated his father with easy respect may now speak with a slightly different tone, not openly disrespectful, but more cautious, more measured. It is in these subtle differences that a child learns how social standing works, not through explanation, but through observation. The town itself continues its routines. Markets open, goods are traded, and local matters are discussed as they always have been. But for the Shakespeare household, participation in that life becomes less visible. John's absence from civic duties is noticed, even if it is not openly questioned. At the same time, the wider world continues to shape even the smallest communities. Under the rule of Elizabeth I, England is navigating a period of relative political stability, but religious and economic pressures remain close to the surface. Trade fluctuates, local industries rise and fall. The expectations placed on families do not ease simply because circumstances become more difficult. Within the home, Mary Arden provides a quieter form of steadiness. Her background, tied more closely to land and rural life, brings a different kind of resilience. While John's position had been connected to public roles and visible success, Mary's influence is less outward but no less important. She maintains the internal order of the household, ensuring that daily life continues even as external conditions become less certain. For William, this creates a balance between two ways of understanding the world. From his father, he has seen ambition, public life, and the importance of reputation. From his mother, he experiences continuity, routine, and the ability to endure change without drawing attention to it. As he grows older, he becomes more aware of how these forces interact. He notices how quickly confidence can turn into caution, how easily authority can be questioned once it begins to weaken. These are not lessons presented to him directly. They are patterns that reveal themselves over time, in tone of voice, in posture, in the way conversations shift depending on who is present. There is also the matter of expectation. In a household where resources are no longer as secure as they once were, each child's future becomes more significant. There is less room for uncertainty. A son is expected to contribute, to find a path that supports not only himself but, in some measure, the family as well. Yet William's path is not yet defined. He continues his schooling, where structure and discipline provide a different environment from the shifting atmosphere at home. The grammar school in Stratford offers a rigorous education, focused heavily on Latin language and classical texts. Students spend long hours translating, memorizing, and repeating passages, developing both precision in language and endurance in study. In this setting, William encounters voices far removed from his own time and place. Roman writers, historians, and poets present worlds of politics, ambition, conflict, and human behaviour that extend far beyond the boundaries of Stratford. These texts do not simply inform him, they expand the range of what can be imagined. At the same time, the discipline required to engage with them reinforces habits of attention and structure. Language is not used loosely. It is examined, shaped, and understood in relation to meaning and effect. This process, repeated daily, becomes part of how he thinks. Outside the classroom, the contrast between these learned worlds and his own surroundings remains clear. Stratford does not resemble ancient Rome. Its concerns are immediate and practical, but the underlying patterns, power, loyalty, conflict, reputation are present in both. William begins to recognise that while settings change, human behaviour often follows familiar paths. Meanwhile, his father's situation continues to influence how the family is seen. There is no dramatic fall, no single moment that marks a clear turning point. Instead, there is a gradual adjustment in how others respond to them. Invitations may become less frequent. Opportunities that once seemed accessible may no longer be offered as readily. This quiet shift carries its own kind of pressure. It is not loud or urgent, but it is persistent. It suggests that the future cannot be taken for granted, that stability must be rebuilt or replaced. For a young person observing this, the effect is not immediate action but a growing awareness of uncertainty. The idea that life might require movement away from what is known, towards something not yet clear, begins to take shape, even if it is not yet acted upon. At the same time, Stratford itself remains a place of familiarity. Its streets, its routines, and its people continue to form the backdrop of daily life. The changes within the Shakespeare household do not alter the town's rhythm, but they do alter how the family moves within it. William continues to watch, to listen, and to learn not only from books, but from the quiet shifts happening around him. He sees how authority can fade, how respect can change, and how individuals respond when their position is no longer certain. These observations do not yet point him toward a specific future. They do not suggest a clear path or ambition, but they deepen his understanding of the world as something fluid rather than fixed, shaped as much by circumstance as by intention. And in that understanding, something important begins to settle. Not a plan, not a decision, but a readiness, a quiet awareness that life may require more than simply following what has been laid out. The boy who once moved through a stable and predictable household now grows within a space where change is present, even if it is not openly acknowledged. And as that change continues, it prepares him, slowly and without announcement, for a life that will not remain contained within the boundaries of Stratford. As William moves further into adolescence, the structure of his daily life becomes more defined by schooling, and with it comes a different kind of discipline, one that is steady, repetitive, and quietly demanding. The grammar school in Stratford is not large, but it is rigorous. Attendance is expected, and the day begins early, often before the sun has fully settled into the sky. The rooms are simple, with wooden benches and narrow desks worn smooth by years of use. There is little decoration, and no effort is made to make the environment comfortable. The purpose of the school is not to entertain, but to train the mind. Here, William is introduced more deeply to the study of Latin, which forms the foundation of the curriculum. Students are required to read, translate, and memorize passages from classical authors. These include writers such as Ovid, whose stories of transformation and human behavior offer a wide range of characters and situations, and Virgil, whose work presents a structured and carefully shaped vision of history and purpose. At first, this work is mechanical. Words are translated line by line, grammar is corrected, and mistakes are pointed out without much discussion. The process is repetitive, and progress is measured not by creativity but by accuracy. Yet over time, something begins to shift. Through constant exposure, the language becomes less foreign. The effort required to understand each sentence decreases, and the focus moves from simply decoding words to recognizing patterns within them. William begins to notice how meaning can be shaped by order, how emphasis can change depending on structure, and how the same idea can be expressed in different ways depending on choice. This is not presented to him as a creative exercise. It is simply part of the discipline of learning, but the effect is lasting. Language becomes something flexible rather than fixed, something that can be adjusted, refined, and shaped to produce a desired effect. Beyond language itself, the content of these texts introduces him to a wider range of human experience. The stories he reads are not limited to the concerns of a small English town. They include rulers, soldiers, travellers, and ordinary individuals placed in situations that test their decisions and character. Through these works, William encounters ideas of ambition, loyalty, betrayal, and consequence not as abstract concepts, but as lived experiences within the narratives. He begins to understand that human behaviour can be examined, not just observed, and that actions can be understood in relation to motivation and outcome. At the same time, the discipline of the school leaves little room for distraction. The schedule is long, and the expectations are clear. Students are expected to recite passages from memory, often standing before their peers and repeating lines with precision. Errors are corrected immediately, sometimes with little patience. This environment teaches more than language. It teaches endurance, attention to detail, and the ability to focus for extended periods. These habits, once formed, become part of how William approaches not only study, but observation more broadly. Outside the classroom, his awareness of the town continues to deepen. He is no longer simply a child moving through familiar surroundings. He begins to notice how roles are maintained, how certain individuals carry authority, and how others move carefully around them. He observes how merchants speak differently when dealing with customers compared to when they speak among themselves. He notices how local officials adjust their tone depending on who is present. Even in casual interactions, there is a quiet awareness of position and expectation. These patterns are not dramatic, but they are consistent. And because they are consistent, they become predictable. William begins to understand that people often present themselves differently depending on circumstance. A person who appears confident in one setting may be hesitant in another. Someone who speaks freely among friends may become cautious when addressing authority. These shifts are small, but they reveal something deeper about how individuals navigate their place in the world. At home, the changes within his family continue to shape his perspective. His father's reduced presence in public life remains a quiet influence, and the household maintains a careful balance between what is expressed and what is left unsaid. There is no open discussion of loss or decline. Instead, the focus remains on maintaining routine, continuing work, and meeting expectations. This approach does not remove uncertainty, but it contains it, keeping it from becoming overwhelming. For William, this creates an environment where observation becomes even more important. Without direct explanation, he learns to read situations for himself, to interpret tone and behaviour in order to understand what is not being openly stated. At the same time, there are moments that offer a different kind of experience. Travelling players occasionally pass through Stratford, bringing with them performances that contrast sharply with the discipline of the classroom and the routines of daily life. They set up temporary stages, sometimes in open spaces, sometimes in courtyards, and present stories that draw small crowds. These performances are brief, and often simple in their staging, but they introduce something that is not present in either school or home, the idea of transformation through role. Actors take on characters, shifting their voices, their posture, and their expression to become someone else. The same individual who might speak plainly in conversation can, in performance, take on the manner of a king, a soldier, or a fool. The boundaries between identity and role become flexible. For William, this is not simply entertaining. It suggests a possibility that the patterns he has been observing in everyday life can be shaped, organised, and presented in a deliberate way. He begins to see that the differences in how people behave are not random. They follow recognisable structures, influenced by situation, intention, and expectation. And if they follow structures, they can be understood and perhaps even recreated. This idea does not immediately lead to action. There is no sudden decision, no clear moment where he resolves to pursue anything beyond his current path, but the impression remains. Meanwhile, his education continues, building layer upon layer of language, structure, and understanding. The texts he studies become more complex, and the expectations placed on him increase. He is required not only to translate but to interpret, to understand not just what is being said, but why it is said in that particular way. This process encourages a kind of thinking that moves beyond surface meaning. It requires attention to context, to intention, and to the relationship between words and their effect. As he grows older, the question of his future becomes more present, even if it is not yet clearly defined. The path of continuing in Stratford, taking on a trade, and maintaining a stable life remains the most likely option. It is the path followed by many, and it offers a degree of certainty. But alongside that expectation, there is now a broader awareness of what exists beyond the town. Through his studies and his observations, William has encountered worlds that extend far beyond his immediate surroundings. He has seen how language can shape thought, how behaviour can reveal deeper patterns, and how stories can capture both. These understandings do not yet form a plan, but they begin to separate him, quietly, from the limits of his environment. He remains part of Stratford, moving through its routines and expectations, but his perspective is no longer entirely contained by it. And as his schooling continues, the combination of discipline, observation, and exposure to wider ideas prepares him for a life that will eventually require him to step beyond what is familiar. As William approaches early adulthood, the steady rhythm of schooling begins to give way to a different set of expectations, shaped less by study and more by responsibility. In Stratford, there is no clear transition marked by ceremony or declaration. Instead, the shift is gradual. A young man is no longer treated as a student once his presence is needed elsewhere within the household, within work, or within the broader structure of family life. The question is not what he might become in the distant future, but what role he will take on now. For William, this transition arrives sooner than might have been expected. In late 1582, at the age of 18, he marries Anne Hathaway, a woman from the nearby village of Shottery. She is several years older than him, already established within her own household, and familiar with the routines and expectations of adult life. The marriage itself is arranged with unusual speed. Records show that special permission is granted to proceed without the typical waiting period. This suggests urgency, though the exact reasons are not formally explained. In small communities, such circumstances are often understood without being openly discussed. For William, the effect is immediate. The flexibility of youth is replaced by the structure of obligation. He is no longer simply a son within his parents' household. He is now a husband, expected to provide, to maintain stability, and to take on responsibilities that extend beyond himself. The environment around him does not change dramatically, but his position within it does. The same streets, the same buildings, and the same familiar faces now carry different expectations. Conversations that once passed without weight now include an awareness of his role. Decisions that once affected only himself now carry consequences for others. Within a year, these responsibilities deepen further. In 1583, his first child, Susanna, is born. The presence of a child alters the structure of daily life in ways that are both practical and constant. Time becomes organized around care, routine, and necessity. The future, once abstract, becomes immediate. 2 years later, in 1585, twins are born Hamnet and Judith. The household expands quickly, and with it comes a greater demand for stability and resources. The rhythm of life becomes fuller, more complex, and less flexible. For William, this period is not marked by dramatic events, but by steady accumulation. Each new responsibility adds to the previous one, creating a structure that requires attention, effort, and consistency. At the same time, the economic situation of his family remains uncertain. His father's earlier decline continues to influence what opportunities are available. There is no guarantee of inheritance that would provide long-term security. Whatever future William builds must come from his own efforts. The path before him, at least in appearance, is clear. He might continue within Stratford, take on a trade, or find work that allows him to support his growing family. This would align with the expectations of his community and provide a degree of predictability. Yet there is also a quieter tension. The habits of observation and the exposure to wider ideas that shaped his earlier years do not disappear simply because new responsibilities have arrived. They remain present, even if they are not outwardly expressed. He continues to notice how people speak, how they present themselves, and how their roles shift depending on circumstance. Within his own household, he experiences these dynamics more directly. Marriage brings together two individuals with their own habits, expectations, and ways of understanding the world. Daily life requires adjustment, compromise, and awareness of another person's perspective. Parenthood adds another layer. The needs of children are immediate and constant, requiring attention that cannot be delayed or set aside. This creates a different relationship with time, one that is structured not by personal choice, but by necessity. At the same time, the wider town continues its routines. Stratford does not pause for individual changes. Markets open, trades continue, and local matters proceed as they always have. Within this steady environment, William's personal life grows more complex, even as the world around him appears unchanged. There are also larger forces at work, though they remain distant in daily experience. England under Elizabeth I continues to maintain political stability, but economic pressures and social expectations remain present. Opportunities are not evenly distributed, and movement between social positions is not easily achieved. For a young man with a growing family, these conditions create a practical question: how to secure a future that is not limited by the uncertainties already visible in his own household. The answer is not immediate, and it is not recorded in clear terms. What is known is that, within a few years, William's presence in Stratford becomes less certain. This period, often referred to as the beginning of his lost years, is marked by an absence of detailed records. There are no clear accounts of his activities, no formal documentation that explains where he is or what he is doing. What remains are possibilities, suggested by later references and by the trajectory of his life. What can be understood, however, is the pressure that precedes this absence. Responsibility, uncertainty, and limited opportunity create conditions that often lead individuals to seek change. The decision to leave a familiar environment is rarely sudden. It develops over time, shaped by necessity as much as by ambition. For William, the idea of remaining in Stratford may have begun to feel increasingly constrained. The town offers stability, but also limitation. The paths available within it are known, and while they provide structure, they do not necessarily allow for significant change in circumstance. At the same time, the awareness of a larger world introduced through education, observation, and occasional glimpses of travelling performers remains present. It suggests that other possibilities exist, even if they are not clearly defined. The contrast between these two realities, what is available and what might be possible, creates a quiet tension. Within his household, the demands of daily life continue without pause. There is no space for extended reflection or uncertainty. Food must be prepared, children must be cared for, and work must be done. The structure of responsibility does not allow for hesitation. And yet, beneath that structure, the question remains. It is not expressed openly, and it does not lead immediately to action, but it grows, shaped by the conditions around him and the awareness he has developed over time. How does one move beyond what is given? How does one build something different from what has already been experienced? There is no single answer, and no clear moment where the decision is made. But as the years pass, and as the pressures of responsibility and limitation continue to shape his life, the possibility of change becomes more than an abstract idea. At some point in the later 1580s, William Shakespeare's presence in Stratford becomes uncertain, not in a dramatic or recorded departure, but in a quiet absence that leaves behind more questions than answers. There is no document that describes the moment he leaves. No written account explains his decision, his route, or even the exact year. Instead, what remains is a gap in the record, a period where his life is not formally tracked. This span of time will later be called his lost years, not because nothing happened, but because what did happen was not preserved in detail. Yet absence itself can still be understood through context. By this time, William is a husband and a father of 3 young children. His responsibilities are clear, and his circumstances are not especially secure. Stratford offers familiarity, but limited opportunity for advancement. His father's earlier decline continues to shape what is available to him, and the expectations placed upon him do not leave much room for uncertainty. To leave under such conditions is not a casual decision. It suggests that remaining may have felt more restrictive than uncertain movement. The pull of necessity, combined with a growing awareness of wider possibilities, likely played a role in shaping what followed. England itself is not still during this period. Under the reign of Elizabeth I, the country is experiencing changes that are both subtle and far-reaching. Trade routes expand, towns grow, and London in particular begins to draw people from across the country. It offers opportunity, but also risk. It is a place where individuals can change their circumstances, but not without effort. For someone like William, London represents both uncertainty and possibility. It is distant from Stratford in more ways than distance alone. The pace of life is faster, the population denser, and the range of occupations broader. It is also a place where social position is less fixed than in smaller towns, allowing for movement that might not be possible elsewhere. The journey itself, though not recorded in detail, would not have been simple. Travel during this period is slow and often uncomfortable. Roads vary in condition, and the distance between towns requires careful planning. A traveller moves not only through physical space, but through changing environments, fields, forests, and settlements, each with its own rhythm and character. For William, leaving Stratford means stepping away from everything that is known, family, routine, and the structure of daily life that has shaped him since childhood. It also means leaving behind immediate responsibility, at least in a physical sense, placing distance between himself and the household he has helped create. This distance is not easily understood in modern terms. Communication is limited, and travel is not frequent. To leave is to accept that connection will be less immediate, more uncertain. It requires a different understanding of family, one that allows for separation in pursuit of something not yet clearly defined. During these lost years, various possibilities have been suggested by later accounts. Some propose that he may have worked as a school teacher, drawing on his education to instruct others. This would align with the skills he developed in grammar school and provide a practical means of support. Others suggest that he may have become involved with travelling players, joining a group that moved between towns performing for different audiences. This possibility connects with the occasional performances he would have seen in Stratford and offers a path into a world that blends storytelling with performance. There are also suggestions that he may have taken on smaller roles within the theatre world, perhaps assisting with stage management or other practical aspects of production. These roles, though less visible, would provide valuable experience and exposure to how performances are organised and delivered. None of these possibilities can be confirmed with certainty. What they share, however, is a connection to language, performance, and observation areas that align with the patterns already present in William's earlier life. Even without detailed records, it is reasonable to understand that this period is one of transition. It is a time where he moves from the structured environment of Stratford into a more fluid and uncertain world. The habits he has developed, attention to language, awareness of behaviour, and endurance in study become tools that can be applied in new contexts. At the same time, the absence of formal documentation does not mean the absence of development. Growth often occurs outside of recorded events, shaped by experience rather than by notable milestones. It is during such periods that individuals test their abilities, adapt to new conditions, and begin to define themselves in ways that are not yet visible to others. For William, these years likely involve a combination of work, observation, and gradual movement toward a more defined path. Whether in teaching, travelling, or assisting within the theatre world, each experience contributes to a broader understanding of how language and performance function together. London, in particular, begins to emerge as a central point of activity. Its theatres attract audiences from various backgrounds, creating a space where stories are shared, adapted, and reshaped. The environment is competitive, with multiple companies vying for attention, and success is not guaranteed. To enter this world requires both skill and persistence. It is not enough to observe. One must also contribute, finding a role within an established structure while gradually developing an individual voice. By the early 1590s, William Shakespeare's name begins to appear in records connected to the London theatre scene. This suggests that, whatever path he took during his lost years, it eventually led him to a position where he could participate more directly in this environment. The transition from absence to presence is not marked by a single event, but by a gradual emergence. His work becomes known, his involvement recognised, and his position within the theatre world begins to take shape. Looking back, the lost years are not empty. They are simply unrecorded in detail. They represent a period where movement, adaptation, and experience prepare him for what will follow. They are the space between what was given and what will be created. And as that space closes, and as his life becomes visible again in the records of London, the direction that has been forming quietly begins to take a clearer shape. The boy from Stratford, shaped by observation and circumstance, now steps into a world where those qualities will be tested, refined, and eventually expressed in ways that reach far beyond the life he left behind. 6. Section 6. By the early 1590s, William Shakespeare is no longer an absence in the historical record. His name begins to appear in London, attached to a world that is louder, faster, and far less predictable than the one he left behind. London at this time is not a quiet city. It is crowded, active, and constantly in motion. The population has grown rapidly, drawing people from across England who are seeking work, opportunity, or simply a change from the limits of smaller towns. Streets are narrow and often congested, filled with traders, apprentices, labourers, and visitors moving between markets, workshops, and places of entertainment. The air carries a mix of smells, food being prepared, waste being removed, smoke rising from hearths, and the presence of the nearby Thames, which serves both as a route for transport and a reminder of the city's dependence on trade. Noise is constant. Voices overlap, carts move over uneven ground, and the daily activity of thousands of people creates a steady background of sound. For someone arriving from Stratford, the contrast is immediate. There is less familiarity, fewer shared assumptions, and a greater need to adapt quickly. In a small town, identity is shaped by known relationships. In London, it must be established more actively. William's first years in the city are not clearly documented in detail, but his presence within the theatre world begins to take form. The theatres themselves are not located within the strict boundaries of the city, but rather on its edges, in areas where regulation is looser and entertainment is permitted to develop more freely. One of the most well-known of these early venues is the theatre, a structure built specifically for performances. Unlike temporary stages in town squares, this is a permanent space designed to host regular audiences. It represents a shift in how performance is organised, less occasional and more continuous. The environment around these theatres is mixed. They attract a wide range of people, from labourers seeking simple entertainment to individuals of higher status who come to observe or be seen. The audience is not silent or distant. It reacts openly, responding to what is presented with laughter, approval, or disapproval. For someone entering this world, the challenge is not only to perform or contribute, but to understand what holds attention in such a setting. The expectations of the audience are immediate, and success is measured in real time. William's role at this stage is likely not prominent. He may have begun as an actor, taking on smaller parts, or as someone assisting with the preparation and organisation of performances. These roles, though less visible, provide valuable access to the workings of the theatre. He observes how plays are constructed, how scenes move from one to another, and how language must be shaped to reach an audience that is both attentive and easily distracted. He sees what captures interest and what does not, learning not through formal instruction but through direct experience. At the same time, the theatre world in London is competitive. Multiple companies operate within the city, each seeking to attract audiences and maintain financial stability. Plays are not static works. They are adapted, revised, and sometimes replaced quickly in response to demand. This environment requires flexibility. Writers must produce new material regularly, actors must learn and perform a range of roles, and companies must manage both creative and practical concerns. William begins to contribute more directly as a writer, adapting existing plays and gradually developing original work. This process is not separate from performance. Writing for the stage requires an understanding of how words function when spoken aloud, how dialogue moves action forward, and how scenes maintain attention. His earlier education in language now becomes directly useful. The discipline of Latin study, the awareness of structure, and the familiarity with classical narratives all contribute to his ability to shape material that is both clear and engaging. At the same time, his observations of everyday behaviour continue to inform his work. The characters he creates are not distant figures. They reflect patterns he has seen how individuals speak, how they respond to pressure, and how their actions reveal underlying motivations. London itself provides a wide range of examples. The city brings together people from different regions, backgrounds, and occupations. Each carries their own way of speaking and behaving, creating a varied and dynamic environment. For William, this diversity is not overwhelming but instructive. It expands the range of what he can represent, offering a broader set of human experiences to draw from. There are also challenges that extend beyond the theatre itself. The city is not always stable. Outbreaks of illness, particularly plague, can lead to the temporary closure of theatres, disrupting both income and routine. During such periods, individuals connected to the theatre must find alternative ways to sustain themselves. These interruptions highlight the uncertainty of life in London. Success is not guaranteed, and stability can shift quickly in response to conditions beyond individual control. Despite these challenges, William's position begins to strengthen. His work gains recognition within the theatre community, and his involvement becomes more consistent. He is no longer simply observing or assisting. He is contributing in ways that shape the performances themselves. This transition is gradual. There is no single moment where he is suddenly recognized as a leading figure. Instead, his presence grows through repeated involvement, through the steady production of work that meets the needs of the company and the expectations of the audience. At the same time, his connection to Stratford remains, though it is now defined by distance. His family continues their life there, while he builds a different kind of existence in London. The two worlds are linked, but they operate on separate rhythms. This division does not resolve immediately. It remains a part of his life, shaping how he moves between responsibility and opportunity. Within London, however, his direction becomes clearer. The theatre is no longer an uncertain possibility. It is his primary environment, the place where his skills are applied and developed. He learns not only how to write, but how to write for a specific context, for a stage, for an audience, and for a company that depends on regular performance. William Shakespeare becomes more firmly established within London's theatre world. His role begins to shift from participation to contribution in a more defining sense. He is no longer simply present within the environment, he is helping shape what appears on stage. This development does not happen suddenly. It emerges through repeated involvement, through the steady need for new material, and through his growing familiarity with how performances function in practice. The theatre is not a place where ideas remain abstract. Every line must be spoken, every scene must hold attention, and every performance must respond to the expectations of a live audience. In this setting, writing becomes closely tied to performance. A play is not complete when it is written. It is completed when it is performed. This requires a different approach to language, one that considers sound, rhythm, and clarity as much as meaning. Words must carry across an open space, reach listeners who may not be fully attentive, and remain understandable even when spoken quickly. William's earlier training in structured language now finds a new application. He begins to adapt existing stories, drawing from familiar sources and reshaping them to suit the needs of the stage. This process is not about invention alone, but about selection and arrangement, choosing what to include, what to omit, and how to present events in a way that maintains continuity. The theatre companies of London often rely on such adaptations. Stories from history, legend, and earlier literature are reworked to fit current audiences. This allows for a balance between familiarity and novelty. Audiences recognise the general outline of a story, but remain engaged by the way it is presented. Within this system, William develops a method of working that is both practical and attentive. He observes how audiences respond to certain scenes, which moments hold attention, and which pass without strong reaction. These observations inform his revisions, leading to adjustments that improve clarity and engagement. At the same time, he continues to act, though his roles are not always central. Acting provides him with direct experience of how lines function in performance. He understands what it means to deliver dialogue, to maintain timing, and to respond to other performers on stage. This experience shapes his writing, allowing him to create material that aligns with the realities of performance. The physical structure of the theatre also influences his approach. Stages are relatively simple, without elaborate scenery. This places greater emphasis on language to establish setting and action. A location must be conveyed through description and dialogue rather than visual representation. Time must be managed through transitions that are clear without being explicitly stated. These constraints do not limit his work, they define it. They require a focus on essentials, on what must be communicated and how it can be done efficiently. Over time, this leads to a style that is both direct and flexible, capable of adapting to different types of stories. The environment around the theatre continues to provide a wide range of material. London's population brings together individuals from different regions and social positions, each with their own way of speaking and behaving. This diversity offers a continuous source of observation. William pays attention to these differences. He notices how language changes depending on context, how individuals adjust their speech when addressing someone of higher status, and how informal conversation differs from formal expression. These variations begin to appear in his writing, giving his characters distinct voices. The theatre companies themselves operate as organised groups, with clear roles and shared responsibilities. Each member contributes to the overall production, whether through acting, writing, or managing practical aspects of performance. This structure provides stability, allowing for regular work and consistent output. Within this system, William's position becomes more secure. His contributions are recognised, and he becomes a reliable source of material for the company. This reliability is important. The theatre depends on a steady supply of plays, and those who can provide them consistently are valued. At the same time, the competitive nature of the theatre world remains present. Other companies produce their own plays, attracting audiences with different styles and approaches. Success is not permanent, and maintaining attention requires ongoing effort. William responds to this environment not by repeating the same approach, but by adjusting his work to meet changing expectations. He explores different types of stories, varying tone and structure while maintaining clarity. This flexibility allows him to remain relevant within a dynamic setting. There are also moments when external conditions affect the theatre. Outbreaks of illness can lead to temporary closures, interrupting performances and limiting income. During such times, writers and actors must adapt, sometimes focusing on other forms of work or waiting for conditions to improve. These interruptions, though disruptive, do not halt development. They provide time for reflection and revision, allowing for adjustments that can be applied when performances resume. As William continues to work, his confidence in his role increases. He is no longer uncertain about his place within the theatre. He understands the demands of the environment and has developed the skills needed to meet them. His writing becomes more assured, his ability to structure scenes more refined, and his understanding of audience response more precise. These developments are not marked by a single achievement, but by consistent improvement over time. At the same time, his connection to Stratford remains part of his life, though it is now distant. His family continues their routines there, while he remains in London, focused on his work. The separation is not resolved, but it becomes an accepted part of his circumstances. Within London, however, his identity becomes increasingly tied to the theatre. It is the space where his abilities are recognised and where his efforts produce visible results. It offers both challenge and opportunity, requiring ongoing attention but also providing a path forward. As the 1590s progress, William Shakespeare's position within London's theatre world becomes more visible, not through sudden acclaim, but through steady and recognisable presence. His name begins to circulate more consistently among those connected to performance, writing and patronage. He is no longer only part of a working company, he is becoming known for what he produces within it. This recognition develops in a practical way. His plays are performed repeatedly, and audiences return. The success of a play during this period is not measured by printed copies or long-term preservation, but by immediate response. A play that holds attention, that brings in paying spectators, and that can be performed again without losing interest becomes valuable. Shakespeare's work begins to meet these expectations with increasing consistency. At the same time, the theatre world itself is becoming more organised. Companies are not informal groups but structured enterprises, often operating under the protection of noble patrons. This arrangement provides a degree of legitimacy and stability, allowing performances to continue with less interference from authorities who might otherwise view public gatherings with suspicion. Within this system, writers who can produce reliable material are essential. Shakespeare's ability to adapt stories, develop dialogue that works in performance, and respond to audience expectations places him in a position of growing importance. His contributions are not occasional. They are part of the ongoing operation of the company. There is also a shift in how his work is perceived by others in the literary community. Not all responses are supportive. In 1592, a writer named Robert Greene makes reference to Shakespeare in a published text, describing him in terms that suggest both recognition and criticism. The remark indicates that Shakespeare is seen as someone who has risen within the theatre world, perhaps more quickly than others expected. Such criticism is not unusual in a competitive environment. The theatre attracts individuals with different backgrounds and levels of formal education, and tensions can arise between those who follow traditional paths and those who find success through practical experience. For Shakespeare, this moment reflects not rejection but visibility. His work has reached a level where it is noticed beyond his immediate circle. At the same time, he continues to write and refine his approach. His early histories and comedies begin to take clearer shape, drawing from both classical sources and English chronicles. These plays do not present history as distant or fixed. They bring it into a form that can be experienced directly by an audience. Through these works, he explores themes of leadership, loyalty, and the consequences of decisions made under pressure. These are not presented in abstract terms. They are shown through characters whose actions reflect both intention and limitation. His comedies, in contrast, focus more on social interaction, misunderstanding, and resolution. They draw from everyday behaviour, presenting situations that audiences can recognise while still offering variation and structure. The balance between complexity and clarity becomes one of his defining strengths. London itself continues to influence his work. The city's diversity provides a wide range of voices and behaviours, allowing him to develop characters that feel distinct without being exaggerated. He observes how individuals from different backgrounds interact, how language shifts depending on context, and how social expectations shape behaviour. This attention to detail allows his plays to function on multiple levels. They can be understood immediately by those seeking straightforward entertainment, while also offering more subtle observations for those who look more closely. At the same time, the practical demands of the theatre remain constant. New plays are required regularly, and revisions are often necessary to maintain audience interest. Shakespeare works within this cycle, producing material that aligns with the needs of the company while continuing to develop his own approach. There are also periods of disruption. Outbreaks of plague lead to the temporary closure of theatres, interrupting performances and limiting income. During these times, writers and actors must adjust. Shakespeare turns, at least in part, to poetry, producing works that can circulate in written form even when the stage is unavailable. These poems, including narrative works such as those dedicated to patrons, demonstrate a different aspect of his ability. They are more controlled, more focused on language itself, and less dependent on performance. This shift does not replace his work in theatre, but it adds to his range. Financially, his situation begins to improve. Regular involvement with a successful company provides a more stable income than irregular work. This stability allows him to consider longer-term plans, including investments and the possibility of securing a more permanent position within society. Despite this progress, his life remains divided between London and Stratford. His family continues to live in the town where he began, while his work keeps him in the city. The distance is managed rather than resolved, becoming part of the structure of his life. As his recognition grows, so does his confidence in his role. He is no longer testing whether he can succeed in the theatre. He is working within a system where his contributions are expected and valued. This change is not dramatic, but it is significant. It marks the transition from uncertainty to established presence. The environment around him continues to evolve. Theatre audiences expand, companies refine their operations, and the demand for new material remains steady. Within this context, Shakespeare's ability to adapt and produce consistently becomes one of his defining qualities. His work begins to show greater control, not only in structure but in the way it engages with different aspects of human experience. He moves between genres, adjusting tone and focus while maintaining a clear sense of purpose. This period does not represent a final stage, but a consolidation. The foundations of his career, built through observation, adaptation, and steady effort, are now firmly in place. From this position, he is prepared to take on a more central role within the theatre world, one that will bring greater influence, broader recognition, and new opportunities to shape the direction of his work. As the decade continues, William Shakespeare's position within London's theatre world becomes more secure, not only through his writing but through his formal association with a specific company. This development brings a level of stability that had not been present in his earlier years, shaping both his daily work and his long-term direction. He becomes a key member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, a company operating under the patronage of a high-ranking official within the court of Elizabeth I. This arrangement is more than symbolic. Patronage provides protection, allowing the company to perform with a degree of legitimacy that independent groups might not have. It also creates a connection between the theatre and the structures of power, linking performance to the broader cultural life of the country. Within this company, roles are clearly defined. Actors, writers, and managers work together to maintain a consistent schedule of performances. The company operates as a shared enterprise, with members often holding financial stakes in its success. This means that each individual's contribution is tied directly to the group's overall performance. For Shakespeare, this structure offers both opportunity and responsibility. As a writer, he is expected to produce plays that can be performed regularly and that attract audiences. As a member of the company, he is also invested in its success, sharing in both the risks and the rewards. This arrangement changes the nature of his work. He is no longer writing for general use or occasional performance. He is writing for a specific group of actors, for a known stage, and for audiences that return to see new productions. This allows him to tailor his material more precisely, shaping roles with particular performers in mind and structuring scenes to suit the physical space of the theatre. One of the central figures within the company is Richard Burbage, an actor known for his ability to take on leading roles. Working alongside performers like Burbage provides Shakespeare with a clearer understanding of how characters can be developed through performance. He writes roles that make use of an actor's strengths, creating parts that are both demanding and effective on stage. The relationship between writer and actor becomes more integrated. Dialogue is shaped not only by narrative needs, but by how it will be delivered. Timing, emphasis, and pacing are considered as part of the writing process. This close connection between creation and performance strengthens the overall quality of the plays. The company's performances take place in established venues, drawing audiences from across London. These audiences are varied, including individuals from different social backgrounds. Some attend for entertainment, others for social reasons, and some out of genuine interest in the stories being presented. This diversity requires a balance in the plays themselves. They must be accessible without being overly simple, engaging without becoming confusing. Shakespeare develops an ability to address different levels of understanding within the same work, allowing various audiences to find something that holds their attention. At the same time, the company's success depends on consistency. New plays are needed regularly, and older plays must be maintained and occasionally revised. Shakespeare works within this cycle, producing material that meets immediate needs while also building a broader body of work. Financially, his involvement with the Lord Chamberlain's men provides a more stable income than he had previously experienced. As a shareholder in the company, he benefits directly from its success. This allows him to move beyond short-term survival and begin to consider longer-term goals. He invests in property, including the purchase of a house in Stratford known as New Place. This acquisition represents more than financial success. It marks a shift in his social position, allowing him to re-establish a form of status within the town where his family remains. This connection to Stratford continues alongside his life in London. He moves between the two, maintaining ties to both environments. The division is not resolved, but it becomes a stable arrangement, allowing him to balance personal and professional responsibilities. Within London, his role continues to expand. His plays are performed not only in public theatres, but also at court, where they are presented before members of the royal household. These performances require a different level of preparation and formality, reflecting the expectations of a more controlled audience. The opportunity to perform at court further increases his visibility, connecting his work to the highest levels of society. It also reinforces the importance of his association with the Lord Chamberlain's men, whose patronage makes such performances possible. At the same time, the broader environment of the theatre remains competitive. Other companies continue to produce their own plays, and audiences have choices about where to spend their time and money. Maintaining success requires ongoing effort, adaptation, and attention to changing preferences. Shakespeare responds to these conditions by continuing to refine his work. His plays become more structured, his characters more distinct, and his use of language more controlled. He explores a wider range of themes, moving between different types of stories while maintaining a consistent level of clarity. The stability provided by the company allows him to focus more fully on development rather than survival. He is no longer entering the theatre world, he is established within it, working from a position of relative security. This does not remove all challenges. External factors, such as outbreaks of illness or shifts in public policy, can still disrupt performances. But the company's structure provides a framework that can absorb these disruptions more effectively than before. As this period continues, Shakespeare's identity becomes closely linked with the Lord Chamberlain's men. His work is not separate from the company. It is part of its ongoing activity, contributing to its reputation and success. From this position, his career enters a new phase, one defined not only by participation and recognition, but by influence. The foundation has been established, and the conditions are now in place for a period of sustained creativity and expansion. The new century, William Shakespeare's work reaches a stage where structure, environment, and opportunity align more closely than at any previous point in his life. This alignment is not accidental. It is the result of years of steady involvement, adaptation, and the gradual strengthening of his position within the Lord Chamberlain's men. A central development during this time is the creation of a new performance space, one that becomes closely associated with both the company and Shakespeare's work, Globe Theatre. The Globe is not built from entirely new materials. Instead, it is constructed in part from the timber of an earlier theatre, carefully dismantled and transported across the River Thames. This process reflects the practical nature of the theatre world. Resources are reused, structures are adapted, and continuity is maintained through change. The new theatre provides a more permanent and controlled environment for performances. Its open-air design allows for large audiences, while its circular structure creates a sense of shared space between performers and spectators. The stage extends into the audience area, reducing the distance between those who act and those who watch. For Shakespeare, this space offers both opportunity and constraint. The size of the theatre allows for larger audiences, increasing the potential reach of each performance. At the same time, the open structure requires that language remain clear and effective, capable of carrying across the space without losing meaning. He adapts his writing to suit these conditions. Scenes are structured to maintain movement, avoiding long periods of stillness that might weaken audience attention. Dialogue is shaped to be both expressive and direct, ensuring that it can be followed even in a setting where distractions are present. The Globe also reinforces the collaborative nature of the company. As a shareholder, Shakespeare has a direct stake in the theatre's success. The financial and creative aspects of his work are now closely connected. A successful play does not only bring recognition, it contributes to the stability of the enterprise as a whole. This connection encourages a careful balance between creativity and practicality. Plays must be engaging, but they must also function reliably within the performance schedule. They must attract audiences, but also be manageable for actors and stage crews. During this period, Shakespeare's writing shows increased confidence and control. He is no longer experimenting with structure in the same way he might have in earlier years. Instead, he refines his approach, developing plays that are both cohesive and adaptable. He continues to draw from a variety of sources, including historical accounts and earlier literary works, but his handling of these materials becomes more assured. He is not simply retelling stories, he is shaping them to fit the needs of the stage and the expectations of his audience. The Globe itself becomes a central part of London's cultural life. It attracts a wide range of spectators, from those seeking entertainment to those interested in the social experience of attending performances. The theatre operates regularly, providing a consistent venue for the company's work. At the same time, the broader context of England continues to influence the environment in which these plays are produced. The later years of Elizabeth I's reign bring both continuity and quiet tension. Questions of succession and political stability exist beneath the surface, even if they are not openly discussed in everyday life. These conditions create a background that informs the themes explored in Shakespeare's work. While his plays are not direct commentaries on current events, they often reflect broader concerns about leadership, authority, and the consequences of decisions made at the highest levels. Within the Globe, these themes are presented through structured narratives that allow audiences to engage with complex ideas in an accessible way. The stage becomes a space where different perspectives can be explored, not through direct argument, but through the actions and outcomes of characters. Shakespeare's role within the company continues to expand. He is no longer simply a contributor, he is a central figure whose work helps define the company's identity. His plays are expected, relied upon, and integrated into the regular operation of the theatre. This position allows him to focus more fully on the development of his writing. He refines his use of language, adjusts pacing, and explores a wider range of character types. His understanding of audience response becomes more precise, allowing him to anticipate how different elements of a play will be received. At the same time, the demands of production remain constant. The company requires a steady supply of new material, and revisions are often necessary to maintain engagement. Shakespeare works within this cycle, balancing innovation with consistency. His connection to Stratford remains part of his life, though it is now supported by increased financial stability. His investments allow him to maintain a presence in the town while continuing his work in London. The division between these two worlds becomes more manageable, even if it is not entirely resolved. The Globe also serves as a physical representation of his career's progression. It is a space built through the combined efforts of the company, reflecting both their past and their future. For Shakespeare, it provides a setting where his work can be presented consistently, reaching audiences on a scale that was not previously possible. As this period continues, his writing reaches a level of maturity that reflects both experience and control. He is no longer adapting to the theatre. He is working within it with a clear understanding of its demands and possibilities. The alignment of environment, structure, and opportunity creates conditions that support a period of sustained productivity. From this position, his work begins to expand further, exploring different aspects of human experience with increasing depth. The Globe stands at the centre of this development not as a symbol of achievement, but as a practical space where ideas are shaped, tested, and shared. And within that space, Shakespeare's work continues to grow, moving toward a phase where both the range and the complexity of his writing will deepen further. As William Shakespeare continues working within the steady rhythm of the Globe Theatre, his writing begins to show a clearer distinction in tone and structure, particularly in the plays that fall into the category of comedy. These works do not simply aim to amuse. They reflect a careful observation of how people interact in everyday life, shaped into situations that allow misunderstanding, tension, and eventual resolution to unfold in a controlled way. Comedy in this context is not separate from reality. It draws directly from it. The settings may vary, some taking place in imagined locations, others in environments that resemble familiar social spaces, but the behaviour within them reflects patterns that audiences recognise. Shakespeare builds these plays around interactions rather than events. The focus is often on how individuals respond to one another, how assumptions are formed, and how those assumptions lead to confusion. Misunderstandings are not presented as accidents alone. They arise from the way people interpret what they see and hear. This approach allows him to explore human behaviour without requiring dramatic or extreme circumstances. A misplaced letter, a mistaken identity, or a conversation overheard in part can set the structure of an entire play into motion. The outcomes depend not on large external forces, but on how characters process and respond to information. At the same time, the resolution of these situations follows a consistent pattern. Confusion is clarified, relationships are restored or redefined, and the structure of the social world is brought back into balance. This does not happen through sudden revelation, but through gradual adjustment, as characters come to understand what has occurred. The language used in these plays reflects this balance. It is flexible, allowing for both clarity and variation. Dialogue moves quickly, with exchanges that reveal character while also advancing the situation. Humour emerges not only from what is said, but from how it is said and how it is received. Shakespeare's experience within London continues to inform this work. The city provides a wide range of social interactions, offering examples of how individuals from different backgrounds communicate and behave. He observes how tone shifts depending on context, how formality changes with status, and how individuals present themselves differently in public and private settings. These observations appear in his characters. Each is given a distinct way of speaking, shaped by their position and perspective. This variety allows audiences to recognize differences without needing explicit explanation. The language itself becomes a marker of identity. At the same time, the structure of the theatre continues to influence how these plays are written. The open-air design of the Globe Theatre requires that dialogue remain clear and audible. Scenes must maintain movement, ensuring that attention does not drift. This encourages a pacing that is steady, with transitions that are easy to follow. The audience, as always, remains central to the process. Their responses, laughter, attention, or distraction provide immediate feedback. Shakespeare adjusts his work accordingly, refining elements that succeed and reconsidering those that do not hold interest. Within the company, collaboration continues to shape the final form of each play. Actors bring their own interpretation to roles, influencing how lines are delivered and how scenes are structured. This interaction between writing and performance remains a defining feature of the theatre. As these comedies develop, they also contribute to Shakespeare's growing reputation. They are performed regularly, attracting audiences who return to see new productions. This consistency reinforces his position within the company and within the broader theatre world. At the same time, the themes within these plays reflect a broader understanding of human behaviour. They explore how individuals navigate relationships, how they respond to uncertainty, and how they adapt when their expectations are challenged. These themes are not presented as abstract ideas. They are embedded within the actions of the characters, revealed through dialogue and interaction. The plays do not explain behaviour, they demonstrate it. Shakespeare also makes use of contrast within these works. Characters of different social positions interact within the same narrative, allowing for variation in language and perspective. This creates a layered structure where multiple viewpoints exist within a single story. The effect is not complexity for its own sake, but clarity through variation. By presenting different ways of understanding a situation, the plays allow audiences to see how interpretation shapes outcome. At the same time, the practical demands of the theatre remain unchanged. New material is required, and performances must continue. Shakespeare works within this ongoing cycle, producing plays that meet immediate needs while contributing to a growing body of work. His financial position continues to improve, supported by his involvement with the company and the success of its productions. This stability allows him to maintain his investments in Stratford, strengthening his connection to the town even as his work keeps him in London. The division between these two parts of his life remains present, but it is now supported by structure rather than uncertainty. He moves between them with greater ease, balancing personal and professional responsibilities. Within London, his role continues to be defined by the theatre. It is the environment where his abilities are applied, refined, and recognised. The comedies, with their focus on interaction and resolution, represent one aspect of his work, one that reflects both his observations and his understanding of audience response. As this period continues, another direction begins to emerge within his writing. Alongside the comedies, there is a growing interest in more serious subjects, in exploring situations where resolution is not as simple and outcomes are less balanced. As William Shakespeare's work continues to develop, his attention turns more directly towards stories drawn from history, particularly the history of England itself. These plays, often referred to as histories, do not simply recount past events. They examine how power is gained, maintained, and sometimes lost, presenting leadership as something shaped by both personal ability and external circumstance. The sources for these plays are often drawn from historical chronicles, including the widely circulated accounts of Raphael Holinshed. These texts provide a framework of events, names, dates, and outcomes, but they do not determine how those events are presented on stage. Shakespeare reshapes this material, selecting what to emphasize and how to connect one moment to another. In doing so, he transforms history from a sequence of events into a structured narrative that can be experienced in performance. The plays focus on figures who hold authority, particularly kings and those who move close to them. Through these characters, Shakespeare explores the demands of leadership, the expectations placed upon those in power, and the consequences that follow when those expectations are not met. Power, in these works, is not stable. It depends on perception as much as on position. A ruler must be seen as capable in order to maintain authority. Doubt, even if it begins quietly, can alter how others respond. This creates a situation where leadership is constantly being reinforced or questioned through action. Shakespeare presents these dynamics through interaction rather than explanation. Decisions are made, responses follow, and outcomes emerge from the relationship between intention and circumstance. The audience observes how a choice leads to a particular result, not through abstract reasoning, but through visible progression. The structure of these plays often moves across multiple settings, reflecting the broader scope of historical events. Battles, councils, and private moments are arranged in sequence, allowing the audience to see how different aspects of leadership connect. Public decisions are influenced by private concerns, and personal actions carry wider consequences. Within the Globe Theatre, these shifts in setting are conveyed through language rather than physical change. Dialogue establishes location, time, and context, allowing the audience to follow movement without the need for elaborate staging. This reliance on language reinforces the importance of clarity. Each scene must provide enough information to maintain continuity, ensuring that the progression of events remains understandable even as the scope of the narrative expands. At the same time, Shakespeare introduces a range of characters who represent different perspectives on authority. Some are closely connected to the centre of power, while others exist at a distance from it. This variety allows the plays to explore how leadership affects individuals across different positions. Those near the centre often focus on strategy, responsibility, and the maintenance of order. Those further away may experience the effects of decisions without having influence over them. By presenting both perspectives, Shakespeare creates a broader understanding of how power operates. The language within these plays reflects this range. Formal speech is used in settings where authority is emphasized, while more direct and varied expression appears in interactions outside the immediate center of power. This variation allows the audience to distinguish between different roles without explicit explanation. At the same time, the themes explored in these histories resonate with the environment in which they are performed. England, under Elizabeth I, is stable, but questions of succession remain present. The issue is not openly discussed in public settings, but it exists as a background concern. In this context, plays that examine the transfer of power, the legitimacy of rule, and the consequences of leadership carry an additional layer of relevance. They do not address current events directly, but they reflect patterns that audiences can recognize. Shakespeare's approach remains measured. He does not present clear judgments or simple conclusions. Instead, he allows the progression of events to reveal the strengths and limitations of different approaches to leadership. Success and failure are shown as outcomes shaped by multiple factors rather than by a single decision. As these plays are performed, they contribute to his growing reputation. They demonstrate his ability to handle complex material, to structure narratives that extend beyond individual characters, and to maintain clarity within a broader scope. At the same time, they expand the range of his work. He is no longer focused primarily on social interaction and resolution, as in his comedies. He is addressing larger systems, examining how individuals operate within structures that influence their choices. The demands of the theatre remain consistent. These plays must still engage audiences, maintain pacing, and function within the constraints of performance. Shakespeare balances these requirements with the complexity of the material, ensuring that the narrative remains accessible. Within the company, collaboration continues to shape how these plays are realized on stage. Actors interpret roles, bringing variation to the presentation, while the overall structure remains guided by the written text. Financially and professionally, his position remains stable. His involvement with the company provides consistent work, and his investments in Stratford continue to secure his long-term standing. As this period progresses, another shift begins to emerge within his writing. Alongside the histories, there is a growing focus on more concentrated examinations of individual experience, on situations where internal conflict becomes as important as external action. As William Shakespeare moves further into the early years of the 17th century, his writing begins to shift in a noticeable way. The broader scope of the histories gives way to a more concentrated focus on individual experience. The plays that emerge during this period are often described as tragedies, not because they are defined by sadness alone, but because they examine how decisions, once made, lead to consequences that cannot easily be reversed. In these works, the structure becomes more centered on a single character or a small group of individuals. The narrative follows their actions closely, tracing how thought, intention, and circumstance interact over time. The scale is not necessarily smaller, but the attention is more focused, allowing for a deeper examination of how choices are formed and carried out. Shakespeare approaches these subjects without overt judgment. He does not present characters as simply right or wrong. Instead, he shows how their decisions emerge from a combination of personal traits and external pressures. This creates a sense of progression where outcomes feel connected to earlier moments, even if those connections are not immediately clear. One of the plays that reflects this shift is Hamlet, which centers on a character navigating uncertainty, responsibility, and the difficulty of determining the appropriate course of action. The focus is not on external events alone, but on the process of thinking and deciding. Similarly, in Macbeth, the narrative examines how ambition interacts with opportunity, and how actions taken to secure a position can lead to further consequences that extend beyond initial intention. The structure of the play follows the development of these actions, showing how each step creates conditions for the next. Another example, King Lear, explores the relationship between authority and judgment. presenting a situation where decisions made at the highest level influence not only the individual, but also those around them. The focus remains on how understanding, or the lack of it, shapes outcomes. Within the Globe Theatre, these plays require a different kind of attention from the audience. The pacing remains steady, but the emphasis shifts towards sustained observation. Scenes are structured to allow for reflection as well as action, giving space for the development of ideas alongside events. The language in these works reflects this change. It becomes more controlled, with greater attention to how thoughts are expressed and how meaning unfolds over time. Dialogue often carries multiple layers, allowing characters to reveal both what they intend and what they are uncertain about. At the same time, Shakespeare continues to draw from his observations of everyday behaviour. The situations presented in these plays, while sometimes involving figures of high status, reflect patterns that can be recognised more broadly. The way individuals respond to pressure, how they justify their actions, and how they interpret the behaviour of others remain consistent elements. The environment of London continues to provide context for this work. The city's complexity, its range of social interactions, and its ongoing changes contribute to the understanding that human behaviour is shaped by both internal and external factors. These influences appear in the plays not as direct references, but as underlying patterns. There are also personal elements that may inform this period, though they are not documented in direct connection to specific works. In 1596, Shakespeare's son Hamnet dies at the age of 11. This event is recorded, but its effect on his writing is not explicitly stated. It remains part of the background of his life, one of many experiences that contribute to his perspective. Within the company, the production of these plays continues to rely on collaboration. Actors interpret roles that require sustained attention and variation, moving through changes in tone and situation. The structure of the plays supports this, providing opportunities for different types of expression within a single narrative. The audience's response to these works remains important. While the themes are more concentrated, the plays must still engage and hold attention. Shakespeare balances this by maintaining clarity in the progression of events, ensuring that the narrative can be followed even as it explores more complex ideas. Financially and professionally, his position remains stable. His involvement with the company continues to provide consistent income, and his investments in Stratford maintain his standing within that community. The division between London and Stratford remains part of his life, but it is now an established arrangement. As this period continues, the tragedies represent a deepening of his approach to storytelling. They do not replace his earlier work, but they expand the range of what he addresses. They allow for a more detailed examination of how individuals think, decide, and respond to the outcomes of their actions. By the time William Shakespeare is well established in London, his name is no longer confined to the circle of actors and playwrights who work alongside him. It begins to move outward, spoken in different places, carried by people who have seen his plays, heard of his success, or formed their own impressions from a distance. In a city like London, reputation does not spread in a single direction. It moves through overlapping groups: actors, apprentices, merchants, students, and travellers, each repeating what they have seen or heard, often adding small adjustments along the way. A name becomes familiar not through official recognition, but through repeated mention. Shakespeare is by this point one of those names. Among those connected to the theatre, he is known as reliable, consistent, and productive. His ability to provide new material regularly makes him valuable within his company. Actors depend on his writing, and the company depends on the audience that his plays continue to attract. But outside that immediate circle, the understanding of who he is becomes less precise. Some know him as a writer whose plays are performed at the Globe. Others know him only as a man from Stratford who has done well for himself in London. There are those who are aware of his growing financial success, his investments, his property, and who measure his achievements in practical terms rather than artistic ones. There are also quieter observations. It is noted, in some circles, that he is not formally educated in the same way as certain other writers of the time. He does not come from a university background, and this becomes a point of discussion. For some, it raises questions about how he has achieved his position. For others, it is simply part of his identity, a reflection of a different path into the world of writing. These observations do not form a single opinion. They exist side by side, sometimes overlapping, sometimes contradicting one another. There are also suggestions, never fully confirmed, that he works quickly, that his plays are shaped as much by necessity as by intention. The steady demand for new material requires efficiency, and this becomes part of how his work is understood. Some view this as a strength, others as a limitation. In certain literary circles, where writing is approached more as a scholarly pursuit, there is occasional skepticism. His work is seen as effective for the stage, but not always aligned with the expectations of formal literature. This distinction reflects the difference between writing for performance and writing for reading, two practices that do not always overlap. At the same time, the audience offers a different perspective. Those who attend performances respond not to questions of background or method, but to the experience itself. They return to the theatre, they watch the plays unfold, and they recognize something within them that holds attention. For these individuals, his reputation is shaped by what they see and hear, rather than by how his work is categorized. In this way, his identity becomes layered. To the company, he is a working playwright and shareholder. To some writers, he is a figure whose rise invites comparison. To audiences, he is a source of familiar and engaging stories. To those in Stratford, he is a man who has achieved a level of success that extends beyond the town. These layers do not resolve into a single fixed image. They remain separate, forming a reputation that is both visible and uncertain. There are also practical signs of his success that contribute to how he is perceived. His purchase of property, including new place in Stratford, signals financial stability. This is not a common achievement for someone connected to the theatre, a profession that is often seen as unstable. Such actions influence how others speak about him. Success in material terms provides a form of validation that is easily understood, even by those who have not seen his work. It suggests that his position is not temporary, but established. At the same time, his personal presence remains relatively understated. He is not widely known for public display or for seeking attention beyond his work. This absence of strong personal image allows others to fill the space with their own interpretations. In London, where information moves quickly but not always accurately, this leads to variation. Some describe him as practical and focused. Others see him as reserved. There are those who view him primarily through his work, and others who consider him in terms of his financial and social position. These impressions circulate without being confirmed or corrected. Meanwhile, his daily life continues within the structure of the theatre. He writes, revises, and participates in the ongoing production of plays. The rhythm of this work leaves little room for managing how he is perceived. Reputation develops independently of intention. His connection to Stratford adds another dimension to how he is understood. The distance between his work in London and his family life in the town creates a sense of separation. For some, this is simply practical. For others, it becomes part of how his life is interpreted, a sign of ambition or of necessity, depending on perspective. There is no single explanation that defines it. What remains consistent is the presence of his name within different conversations, each shaped by its own context. He is known, but not in a uniform way. He is recognized but understood differently depending on who is speaking. By the early years of the 17th century, William Shakespeare's life shows clear signs of financial direction and long-term planning. The uncertainty that shaped his earlier years has been replaced, not by ease, but by structure. His work in London continues, but his attention increasingly includes what will remain when that work eventually slows. In Stratford, his presence becomes more visible through property and legal records rather than daily routine. The purchase of New Place had already marked a change in his standing. It is one of the larger houses in the town, situated in a position that reflects both comfort and recognition. Owning such a property alters how he is regarded locally, placing him among those with established means rather than those dependent on trade alone. This change is reinforced through additional investments. He acquires land, secures rights connected to agricultural production, and becomes involved in transactions that extend beyond immediate necessity. These actions are practical, focused on stability rather than display. They suggest an understanding that income from the theatre, while steady for now, may not remain so indefinitely. Such decisions are not unusual among those who achieve financial success in uncertain professions. Property provides continuity. It is visible, measurable, and less dependent on changing conditions than performance-based income. In Stratford, these investments reshape how he is perceived. He is no longer seen primarily as the son of John Shakespeare, whose earlier decline had affected the family's position. Instead, he is recognized as someone who has re-established and extended that position through his own efforts. Local records reflect this shift. His name appears in connection with transactions, disputes, and agreements that indicate active participation in the economic life of the town. These are not symbolic entries. They represent real involvement in the management of property and resources. At the same time, his household in Stratford continues to operate with a steady rhythm. Anne Hathaway remains at the centre of daily life there, managing responsibilities that require consistency and attention. The routines of the household are shaped by practical needs, maintenance, food, and the ongoing care of property. The children, now older, move toward their own roles within the structure of the town. Their lives are shaped more directly by Stratford than by London, even as their father's work continues in the city. In London, Shakespeare's involvement with the theatre remains active. His position within the company is stable, and his work continues to be performed regularly at the Globe Theatre. The demands of writing and production persist, but they are now part of a system he understands fully. His approach to work during this period reflects both experience and efficiency. He writes with a clear sense of what is required, structuring plays that can be integrated into the company's schedule without unnecessary complication. Revisions are made as needed, and the process of production continues without interruption. At the same time, his financial decisions suggest a gradual shift in focus. While he remains engaged in the theatre, his investments in Stratford indicate an awareness that his long-term stability will depend on more than continued writing. This dual focus creates a balance between present activity and future planning. London provides income and opportunity, while Stratford offers permanence and continuity. The two are not in conflict, but they serve different purposes. There are also signs of increased recognition beyond the theatre itself. His association with a successful company, combined with his financial standing, places him in a position where his name carries weight in different contexts. He is not only a playwright, but a property owner and investor. This broader identity influences how he is regarded, particularly in Stratford. Success in London is acknowledged, but it is his tangible presence in the town through property and participation that solidifies his position. At the same time, the broader environment of England continues to change. In 1603, the death of Elizabeth I brings an end to a long and stable reign. The transition to new leadership introduces adjustments within the structure of patronage, including changes that affect the theatre. The Lord Chamberlain's men become the King's men, under the patronage of the new monarch. This shift reinforces the company's status, providing continued support and recognition. For Shakespeare, it means that his work remains connected to the highest levels of society, even as the political context evolves. This continuity within change reflects the broader pattern of his life. Conditions shift, but the structures he has built allow him to adapt without disruption. His work continues, his investments hold, and his position remains secure. As the years progress, there is a gradual sense that his involvement in London, while still active, is no longer the sole focus of his attention. The balance begins to move, slowly, towards Stratford. This is not a sudden withdrawal. It is a measured adjustment, shaped by the accumulation of years and the practical considerations of maintaining what has been built. His writing continues, but with a different sense of pacing. The urgency that once drove constant production is less pronounced. There is space for reflection, for shaping work with a broader view of its place within his career. At the same time, his presence in Stratford becomes more consistent. The house, the land, and the connections within the town provide a setting that is no longer secondary, but increasingly central. In the later phase of William Shakespeare's career, the pace of his work begins to change in a way that is noticeable not through sudden reduction, but through a different kind of attention. The steady demand for new material continues, yet the structure of what he produces shifts, reflecting a quieter and more measured approach. The plays from this period move away from the sustained tension seen in earlier tragedies. They still involve difficulty, uncertainty, and separation, but these elements are approached with a different sense of progression. Instead of leading toward irreversible outcomes, the narratives allow for resolution, often through recognition, reconciliation, or the passage of time. Works such as The Tempest and The Winter's Tale illustrate this change. They are structured around situations that begin with disruption, but gradually move toward restoration. The focus is not on the moment of conflict itself, but on what follows it, how individuals adjust, reconsider, and arrive at a different understanding. The pacing within these plays reflects this approach. Scenes are arranged to allow movement without urgency. Events unfold with enough space for the audience to follow changes in situation and perspective. The structure remains clear, but the emphasis shifts from intensity to continuity. Within the Globe Theatre, these plays function effectively because they maintain engagement while offering a different kind of experience. The audience is not drawn primarily by rapid development or sharp turns, but by the steady progression toward resolution. Language continues to play a central role. It remains precise and adaptable, capable of conveying both immediate action and gradual change. The dialogue supports the movement of the narrative without requiring abrupt transitions. At the same time, Shakespeare's involvement in the theatre appears to become more selective. He continues to write, but not with the same frequency as in earlier years. There is a sense that his work is now guided by choice rather than by necessity. This change aligns with his increasing presence in Stratford. His investments and property there provide a stable foundation, allowing him to spend more time away from the constant activity of London. The balance between the two locations shifts, with Stratford becoming more central to his daily life. In Stratford, the environment differs significantly from that of London. The pace is slower, and the routines are shaped by local needs rather than by the demands of performance. The house at New Place offers space and continuity, providing a setting where daily life can proceed without the interruptions that characterize the city. His role within the town is now well established. He is recognized not only as someone who has achieved success elsewhere, but as a property owner and participant in local affairs. His presence carries weight, supported by both his financial position and his continued connection to the community. At the same time, his connection to the theatre does not disappear. He remains linked to the company, and his plays continue to be performed. The relationship becomes less about constant involvement and more about sustained contribution. There are also signs that collaboration becomes more prominent in this period. Some later works are believed to involve joint efforts with other writers, reflecting a shift in how plays are produced. This approach allows for continuity within the company while accommodating changes in individual involvement. The broader context of England continues to evolve. Under the new monarchy, the structure of patronage remains in place, supporting the theatre while also introducing adjustments in how it operates. These changes do not disrupt Shakespeare's position, but they form part of the environment in which his later work is produced. His writing during this time reflects both experience and distance. The themes of reconciliation and restoration suggest a perspective that has moved beyond the immediate pressures of earlier years. The focus is less on establishing position and more on understanding what follows it. This does not mean that his work becomes detached from reality. The situations he presents still involve recognizable patterns of behavior, shaped by the same attention to detail that has characterized his writing throughout his career. What changes is the direction of those patterns, moving toward resolution rather than continued conflict. As his time in Stratford increases, the practical aspects of his life take on greater importance. Property must be managed, agreements maintained, and local relationships sustained. These responsibilities provide a different kind of structure, one that does not depend on the rhythm of the theatre. The transition between these two environments, London and Stratford, becomes less frequent. Travel continues, but it is no longer the central feature of his routine. Instead, his life begins to settle more consistently in one place. This settling does not represent a withdrawal from his work, but a rebalancing. The theatre remains part of his identity, but it is no longer the sole focus of his time and attention. In the final stretch of William Shakespeare's life, the movement between London and Stratford slows until it becomes less a pattern and more a transition that has already taken place. Stratford is no longer the place he returns to between periods of work. It becomes the place where his days are most often spent. The house at New Place provides a setting that reflects both stability and conclusion. It is not newly acquired, and it does not represent ambition in the way it once might have. Instead, it serves as a place where the various parts of his life come together: his family, his investments, and the outcome of years spent working elsewhere. Daily life here follows a different rhythm from that of London. There are no rehearsals, no constant preparation for performance, and no immediate pressure to produce new material. The structure of the day is shaped by practical concerns: managing property, maintaining the household, and participating in local matters when necessary. This does not mean that his connection to the theatre disappears entirely. His work continues to be performed in London, and his association with the company remains part of his identity. But his direct involvement becomes less frequent. The distance between him and the daily operation of the theatre increases, not abruptly but through gradual reduction. In Stratford, his presence is more consistent. He is recognised as a property owner and as someone who has achieved a level of success that extends beyond the town. This recognition is grounded in visible signs: his house, his land, and his participation in local transactions. At the same time, his personal life remains shaped by earlier patterns. His marriage to Anne Hathaway continues within the structure that has been established over many years. Their lives have been defined by periods of distance and return, and this history informs their daily interactions. The household includes not only family members but also the routines and responsibilities that come with maintaining property. Servants, labourers, and others connected to the household contribute to its operation, creating a network of activity that supports daily life. The town itself remains familiar. Its streets, its markets, and its seasonal rhythms have not changed in fundamental ways. What has changed is Shakespeare's position within it. He is no longer a young man moving through the town with uncertain prospects. He is an established figure, known for both his success and his return. There are also practical matters that require attention. Legal documents from this period show his involvement in property transactions, agreements, and the management of resources. These activities are not dramatic, but they are essential. They ensure that what he has built remains secure. At the same time, his health begins to play a more significant role in shaping his routine. While there are no detailed records describing specific conditions, the general pattern of reduced activity suggests a gradual adjustment. The energy required for constant travel and production is no longer present in the same way. This change is not marked by a single event. It appears through the steady reduction of involvement in activities that once defined his daily life. Writing becomes less frequent, and his role within the theatre becomes more distant. Despite this, his work continues to exist independently of his direct participation. Plays are performed, audiences attend, and the company maintains its operations. His influence remains present through what he has already created. In Stratford, his focus turns more fully toward the immediate environment. The management of property, the maintenance of the household, and the continuation of family life becomes central. These responsibilities provide structure, even as other activities decrease. There is also a sense of completion that becomes more visible during this period. The uncertainties that marked his early life have been replaced by stability. The need to establish a position has given way to the task of maintaining it. This does not mean that his life becomes inactive, rather it becomes more contained, centered within a single location rather than divided between multiple demands. The broader world continues to move around him. London remains active, the theatre continues, and the political and social environment evolves, but his direct engagement with these changes is reduced. He is no longer at the centre of these developments, but remains connected to them through his work. As the years progress, the balance of his life settles more firmly in Stratford. The house, the town, and the routines of daily living provide a consistent framework that contrasts with the earlier phases of movement and change. In the final years of William Shakespeare's life, there is no sudden conclusion, no single defining moment that separates what came before from what follows. Instead, there is a gradual quieting of activity, shaped by time, routine, and the natural limits that come with age. He remains in Stratford, where the structure of his daily life has already settled. The house at New Place continues to serve as the centre of his world. Its rooms, once a sign of achievement, now function simply as part of an established routine spaces where work is no longer urgent and where the pace of life follows familiar patterns. The town itself continues as it always has. Markets open and close, seasons pass, and the rhythm of local life remains steady. For those around him, Shakespeare is not defined solely by his work in London. He is a landowner, a member of the community, and a figure whose presence is part of the town's ongoing life. At the same time, his connection to the theatre continues indirectly. His plays remain in performance, carried forward by the company with which he had long been associated. Audiences in London continue to gather, watching stories that he shaped years earlier, even as he is no longer directly involved in their production. This separation between creator and creation becomes more apparent during this period. The work continues without his active participation, existing as part of a larger system that no longer depends on his daily input. In 1616, at the age of 52, William Shakespeare dies in Stratford. The record of his death is simple, without extended detail. It notes the event, the date, and the place, marking the end of a life that had moved between two distinct worlds. He is buried in the church of the town, where a marker is placed to indicate his resting place. The inscription, practical in tone, reflects a concern with preservation rather than elaboration. It does not attempt to summarize his life or his work. It simply establishes his presence there. In the years that follow, his work does not immediately transform into something fixed or fully preserved. Plays continue to be performed, adapted, and revised as part of the theatre's ongoing activity. The idea of a complete and permanent collection has not yet taken shape. It is only later, through the efforts of those who had worked with him, that his plays are gathered and organised into a single volume. This collection ensures that his work is not lost through the natural process of change and replacement that affects performance-based material. The preservation of these plays allows them to extend beyond their original context. They are no longer limited to the stages on which they were first performed. They become accessible in a different form, capable of being read, studied, and reproduced in new settings. Over time, this shift changes how his work is understood. What was once part of a continuous cycle of performance becomes a body of material that can be examined as a whole. The structure, language, and themes within his plays are recognized not only for their immediate effect, but for their lasting qualities. At the same time, the details of his personal life remain relatively limited in the historical record. There is no extensive account of his thoughts, no complete description of his daily habits, and no single narrative that defines his intentions. What remains are fragments, documents, references, and the work itself. This absence of detailed personal information allows his identity to remain open to interpretation. Different perspectives emerge, shaped by the needs and interests of those who study his work. His life becomes part of a broader discussion, rather than a fixed account. Yet certain elements remain clear. He began in a small town, within a household shaped by both stability and change. He moved into a larger world, adapting to its demands and finding a place within it. He developed a method of working that combined observation, structure, and practical understanding. He built a career that supported both his immediate needs and his long-term stability. These elements do not require embellishment. They form a sequence that can be followed without the need for dramatic emphasis. His work continues because it is structured in a way that allows it to be used, adapted, and understood in different contexts. It does not depend on a single interpretation. It offers patterns of behavior and interaction that remain recognizable, even as circumstances change. In this way, his presence extends beyond his lifetime, not through a single defining moment, but through the continued use of what he created. The theatres where his plays were first performed have changed or disappeared. The audiences who first saw them are no longer present. The environment in which he worked has been altered by time, but the structure of his work remains. It continues to be read, performed, and examined, not as something distant, but as something that still reflects patterns of thought and behaviour that can be recognised. And as the years pass, his name becomes associated not only with the work itself, but with the idea that language, carefully shaped and consistently applied, can extend beyond the conditions in which it was first created. The night settles gently now, and there is nothing left to follow, no further path to trace. The life we have moved through did not begin with certainty, and it did not end with a single defining moment. It unfolded gradually, shaped by circumstance, attention, and steady effort. If you imagine Stratford at dusk, the light lowering across the roofs, the narrow streets becoming still, you can almost sense how such a life would come to rest, not abruptly, but as part of a rhythm that continues beyond any one person. The same river moves past the town as it always has. The same quiet patterns of daily life continue, unchanged in their pace, even as individuals come and go. And somewhere within that stillness, the idea remains that what is built carefully, over time, does not disappear quickly. So there is no need to hold on to every detail, or to follow every step again. Let it settle. Let the sounds of the day fade, the movement slow, and the thoughts become lighter. You've followed the journey from a small town into a wider world, and back again. Now, there is nothing more to carry, only rest.